Welcome to Super Context, a podcast autopsy of media.
How we consume it and how it informs our everyday culture.
I'm Christian Sager, a writer and a designer.
And I'm Charlie Bennett, a librarian and a radio raconteur.
Each episode is us trying to understand the entertainment world that we all live in.
Just a little bit better.
Today's episode is about Janelle Monáe's Dirty Computer. This 2018 concept album is about reckoning, celebrating, and reclaiming what it means to be American. We discuss how Monáe uses her platform to advocate for queer and black women while working with big record labels to also produce commercial success.
You can follow along with show notes at patreon.com/supercontext, where you can leave a message or write us an email at supercontextpodcast@gmail.com. Do you feel included or excluded by this record? So, Chris, I've been thinking a lot recently about the nature of my alienation.
Okay, Boomer.
Wow, that was interesting. I'm pretty sure that I am exactly Gen X, but that's okay.
I just have been dying to use that phrase for the last 2 weeks.
You're like, this is like Mr. Show all of a sudden. You know, I'm 4 years older than you, and you're like, you fucking old man.
Right.
And you are a whippersnapper. Okay?
No, tell me more about it, because I am also feeling the nature of my alienation a lot lately. So let's talk about it.
So I am a full-grown adult male in America, and I have no characteristics that automatically remove me from franchisement. Meaning,
okay, yeah, unpack that.
I operate on the lowest level of difficulty, and it's pretty good. And in the sort of compare and contrast to your youth sort of meditation that I end up in sometimes, I really thought that I had things bad when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. It was all internal. It was mental illness. It was anxiety. It was insecurity. It was the sort of overdone version of my father's true boomer sexism. And I don't think of my parents as like passive white supremacists. You know, I don't think that they were not inclined to be like, we're regular people and we have to be nice to the not regular people. That wasn't their thing. But there was also a certain amount of just waspy kind of containment. Mm-hmm. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all of that, I know exactly what you mean. That's what my family
I know
was
you
like
do.
Too. Yeah.
I know you do, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have a reason to feel disconnected. I didn't have a reason that people sort of identified like, oh, you, dude, you're different from us because you're this way. But my internal pain had to be connected to something.
Sure. Or
it would have been insanity, right, in my mind. So I thought of myself as different. I thought of myself as like off or, you know, just not right with the world. Mm-hmm. When really I was just figuring things out, and I could have done with a little more, you know, hey, we're all in this together kind of stuff.
Yeah, but so I want to throw in two wrenches here. The first I would say is that I think it's important because I do the same thing you're doing right now, where I go like, yeah, I had a fucked up childhood, but it wasn't as bad as some people's. And then I try to invalidate the things that happened to me.
What's hilarious is that your childhood is one of the ones that I would look at and say, oh, right, I had it fine. You know, I disagreed with my dad about some career choices. And
so this is a good example, though, right? Like, it's very easy internally to be like, oh, what I went through is nothing compared to what somebody else went through.
Yeah. And
but that doesn't make what
relative.
happened to you any less real. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It does make me recognize how unreal my understanding of my adolescent alienation is, though. So, and let me say that again. I get now how much of it was made up, how much of it was essentially reverse engineered from a kind of adolescent feeling.
Well, but at the same time, I think, I assumed you were going to be talking about your alienation from present day context.
We're getting there.
Okay.
Just hang tight. Okay.
Because I think it is very possible to be, this is how I like to phrase it, to be of the world but not in it.
Oh, that's very nice. That's very poetic. Are you beside a lake right now?
Yes. No, this is usually how I talk about it with my therapist. Is like
smoking a pipe, a little puff, looking at the world. I feel like I am in the world, but not of it.
You're
of the world,
participating,
but not in it.
you exist within it, but you don't share the same values as most of the other human beings around you, and therefore you feel alienated.
Yes, I feel that too. I am a lot less confident in that feeling, though. I kind of automatically assume that if I think I just don't share the values of most of my contemporaries, I immediately think, and in this voice, are you fucking kidding me? Like, it just, that is not useful. It's probably not true. And it seems like you're just trying to get some cool points, dude.
Oh, well, I mean, I guess I could
say to myself,
yeah, I could take offense to that, but I'm not going to. It is how I try to square my feelings of just being out about in the world and not feeling like I can relate to anybody. I should totally say,
based on the look on your face, I realized that when I was rendering my internal monologue, it sounded like I was telling you that. But that's also not what I think about other people. This is the other part of the you, myself, you, Charlie, are just trying to make this into something that ennobles you or makes you special.
Well, let me
Other people are actually dealing with this stuff.
Yeah, that's true, but that doesn't mean that you can't be. So let me circle it back around that I would say, like, we are in a very unique period of time right now where this is extremely confusing.
Why don't you unpack this real quick?
I guess I would say that right now, because of the immediacy of social media and because of how things are playing out culturally and politically, that it's really easy to feel alienated because you're seeing constant examples of supposed lifestyles that other people are leading that don't quite match your own.
It's super cliche, but the think pieces about how we shouldn't use OK Boomer have already started to be published.
Yeah.
And I think it's been, 5 days since that broke?
It's pretty short, yeah. As we're recording, yeah.
Yeah, this is totally a regular thing that happens. That there's a kind of cultural explosion, a meme-like thought or idea, and then people start saying, "No, let's take a step back and really examine this." This is the first time it's ever been like 5 days that I've noticed.
I had a colleague yesterday who said that she thinks that the reason why OK Boomer blew up so quickly was because there was a New York Times piece about it, and that immediately put it on a certain kind of validation that made it so that others felt like they could attack it.
You know what? That's probably true. Because the way I saw it was sideways on Twitter.
Me too.
I didn't read the New York Times article and say, "Honey, did you see this about the
But it
boomers
was
and the
just
millennials?"
literally in the last 7 days, it went from 0 to 60.
Yeah, and now people are like, "Hey, let's roll it back." Mm-hmm. And I feel like that should take longer. But also, what the fuck do I know? I mean, at this point, and here we come back to alienation. What does all that mean at all to me? Nothing. Mm. This is all bullshit, and I have no interest in it. So what the hell is wrong with me?
So this is a long 9-minute way of us saying that Janelle Monáe's record is about alienation, but that it's not alienation that you feel like you can participate in?
Well, sure. That's one way to say it. I would phrase it like this. Examining Janelle Monáe's dirty computer made me recognize again how unfounded my sense of alienation and rejection is, and how founded it is for many people.
Yeah, but I will maintain.
Sure, yeah,
that is that's a compare and contrast of realities that you're placing, right? Like it's a value judgment almost on alienation.
Yeah, this is not her message.
Yeah.
Her message of inclusion actually does include me.
Right.
It's just I have avoided this kind of music for so long. I have used almost
there we go
defamiliarized revolution as my marker for what's good music. Like the actual instrumentation has to be difficult to listen to for me to feel like it is in some way revolutionary or aggressive or subversive.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this kind of perfect pop record turns out to have messages that are revolutionary, that people reject out of hand. And yet here it is. And I'm delighted by it and also reminded of how uncool I continue to be.
So you just brought up something that I've been thinking about a little bit lately. I remember going to see Fugazi in the 90s one time. And as they did, they were talking about politics from stage to the audience. And they were talking about the meanings of their songs and current events. And there was a big protest that weekend. And I remember Ian talking to the audience and saying, like, you know, remember, like, the importance of protest isn't just to get out there and express your opinion. For some people, they feel, and I'm paraphrasing here, but they feel so alienated that that's the only place where they can go where they feel any kind of commiseration with other people.
Oh, right.
And I think that a record like this operates in the same way.
Yes. And you just gave me exactly the thing I need to sort of sum up all the stuff I was trying to talk about. The things I used, mostly music and sometimes film and books, the things I used to make myself feel connected or more correct in the world were always very individualistic. They were aimed at me, but not through content, more through form.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I was being soothed as opposed to commiserating with a community.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's a nice way to put it. So let's talk a little bit more directly about this record then, and then we can circle back to these feelings, because I think this is some interesting stuff that she's bringing up here. This is the third studio album by a musician named Janelle Monáe. If you're unfamiliar with her, she's a singer, a songwriter, and an actress. Before this record, she released several concept albums, and she has starred in films like Moonlight and Hidden Figures. The first record that she released came out when she was only 21 years old, and this record came out when she was 32. So she's been around as a professional musician for about 10-ish years, or she was when this came out.
Yeah, and she is definitely in the community of musicians. When we get to the personnel and the sort of advisors for this record, it blew my mind.
But the other thing we should mention is that Janelle Monáe is based out of Atlanta, and Charlie lives in Atlanta, and I did live in Atlanta. So I don't know about you, but I had familiarity with her before she kind of broke nationally. The first time I remember her was maybe 2008, and my wife wanted to go see her do a free performance at Criminal Records, which was like our local indie record store. And for whatever reason, we weren't able to make it down there. And I kick myself about that every time Janelle Monáe comes up now, because like it would have been awesome to see her in a small space like that.
I had the advantage of being wired into the college radio community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew who she was, and I'd heard some of her music, and I admired her a lot more than I admired her music, because this kind of record, and I should be very particular about this genre or style or sound is just not what I prefer to listen to.
Like pop dance music.
Yeah, I have nothing against it anymore. I just don't connect with it unless I try. And it turns out that if I try, like with this record, I'm in. I'm sold. But this
kind of gets back to the episode that we did on Grimes.
Yes, totally.
Because they're very similar, and in fact, Grimes shows up on this record and wrote, I think, like the number one single on it.
What I find really delightful and identifiable in Janelle Monáe is that she created an artistic alter ego to get her through the sort of first launch of her career.
Yeah, so her first couple of records, most of the songs were written from the perspective of this android character named Cindy Mayweather. And it was, there was a setting to them that was as if you were in this dystopian future.
And did we make it clear that Janelle Monáe is African American?
I don't think we did, but she is. Yeah. And I believe her background is that she was born in Kansas City, and then she moved to New York for school, and she lived there for a couple of years, but it didn't really work out, and then she moved to Atlanta and started doing music. Yeah.
So she says about the persona of Cindy Mayweather. I chose an android because the android to me represents, quote, the other, unquote, in our society. This is back in 2010 she was talking. I can connect to the other because it has so many parallels to my own life, just by being a female African-American artist in today's music industry. Whether you're called weird or different, all those things we do to make people uncomfortable with themselves, I've always tried to break out of those boundaries. And this is what I mean when I say admirable and identifiable.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes on to say, Cindy helps me talk more. Through this character, Mayweather, of the android, she could address things that she didn't feel comfortable talking about directly. She was able to disassociate herself from being, I guess, a queer black woman.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that maybe she didn't embrace or want to embrace right away.
It is something that I have always wondered about until this record came out, because whether you're using queer to describe her sexuality or just like her sort of aesthetic,
mm-hmm.
it didn't seem to fit with the Atlanta music scene that she was adjacent to. And I always wondered, like, I wonder what it's like for her to try to succeed in this community where like she might be treated like a weirdo.
Yeah, she said, or in a feature about her, a writer said that Mayweather was a proxy for all the things about Monáe that made others uncomfortable, like her androgyny, her opaque sexual identity, her gender fluidity, her defiance of easy categorization. It's funny that I can't say that word being a librarian. But also, Monáe refers to that android feeling as being how you feel when you're on the other end of prejudice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she says, and forgive me for being coy, she says, this is what it feels like to be called an N-word by your oppressor. And she did not say N-word, of course, but
mm-hmm.
I'm going to.
Mm-hmm.
But like she makes an explicit connection to that moment of being othered and diminished with what an android would feel like.
Yeah.
Or be like.
So this record comes at an interesting time for her, because I think if you look at her trajectory, you know, when she was, quote, found by people like Outkast and Sean Combs, that they saw a lot of potential for her to be a star. And yet but maybe part of it was the trajectory of the music industry, and part of it was like her aesthetic didn't just take immediately, but like she kept putting out these records and it wasn't like a huge booming success. They were successful and people loved her. She was
known for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
And she was allowed to continue working in the industry and to do more stuff.
Yeah. And so the mid 2010s, she kind of leaned into acting. And she said, I allowed the universe to rearrange and reinvent me. I have had a gathering phase, and this was leading up to her being an actress and focusing on that instead of singing. She said, I knew that I needed to drop what I was doing when she heard about hidden figures and make sure that no other young girl or boy would go on without knowing about the brilliant women who helped get America into space. I did not want it to seem that I was just a musician artist who was sent a script. I had to audition, and I wanted to honor these three women to the best of my ability. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but she's amazing in it.
Yeah, she's great in it. And it's funny because it's such an old-fashioned setting,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And in fact, old-fashioned both because of the time period and old-fashioned because of what African Americans were expected to be like
mm-hmm.
at the time.
Mm-hmm. And
then she's
her
in
character is kind of like this weird contrast because she's got a sort of, I don't know, a liberated attitude during that period where it wasn't as common, but then also like aesthetically, like fashion wise, the Hidden Figures character almost fits her more than like maybe a present day setting would.
Yeah. And it does seem like she made it clear to whoever she talked to about this movie, it was about the content of the movie. It was about the themes of the movie. She wanted to take part in someone else's work. She wasn't just trying to try a new career. She wasn't saying, well, maybe I could be an actor. What can I work in? She was pulled to both Moonlight and Hidden Figures because they told African-American stories that were complicated, that were about all kinds of people, and that were about things larger than just the stereotypes.
And she feels like this acting experience, I think, led to Dirty Computer in a way. She said, I've always considered myself to be an artist and a storyteller. I want to continue to tell unique, untold, and universal stories in unconventional ways. And so we have to point out, Dirty Computer is a record. It's a concept record, but it's also a 50-some-odd minute short film.
Yeah, a short film was made that pulled in the kind of music videos that had been made or were going to be used as promotional stuff, and gave it kind of connecting tissue to make a story out of it.
So she says this about Dirty Computer. Originally, this was the album that she was supposed to do before her first album,
and
The Arc Android.
Yeah, she means that she herself thought she was supposed to do. This is not like a record deal kind of thing.
Yeah. She said, I felt like I needed to live more. It started to really make itself once I got my mind and my spirit fearless enough to dig deep and have conversations with myself. One of the things that I felt was happening was that I was writing music only when I felt great. So when I wrote this album, it wasn't about perfection. It was about imperfections.
Yeah, she let go of the idea that every single thing that she did in the studio had to be perfect, whatever that definition was. And that fits into the theme of Dirty Computer also, because it's about oddities and otherness that one has that makes them unique.
Yeah. So she points out that this record's been broken up into 3 parts. I having listened to it a bunch of times, I didn't notice that, but I guess
this totally feels like a musician's understanding of their project, not like an explicit sort of rendered form.
So she says the first few songs are about reckoning with what it means to be called the N-word for the first time by a white person, or to be called a bitch for the first time by a man. And then the middle section is celebratory about sexuality and womanness. Okay,
that's clear when you listen to the record.
So Pink and Make Me Feel, which are the like big singles, and I don't know if the Django Jane song is considered to be part of the first or second wave of this record. Then the latter part of the album deals with reclamation, and so she says the song Americans is about reclaiming what it means to be American. This seems to be a big theme on this record, right? That like right now, politically and culturally, she feels alienated from American culture, but she's saying, no, actually, like I should be able to reclaim what it means to be American. These other people are sort of demeaning our society.
Yeah, I want to jump ahead real quick and read one of her explanations of Dirty Computer. She said, dirty computers are inspiring to me. People say that these dirty computers, these humans have these bugs and these viruses, the things that make them unique. And those things are looked at as negatives. But dirty computers look at their bugs and their viruses as attributes, as features, added value to the country, to the society. I'm just saying that I'm a dirty computer, but I am American too.
And this is sort of part of the metaphor within the short film, right? So the plot of the short film is it's in a dystopian future, but she's not Cindy Mayweather in this one. And she has been brought in by this like oppressive, tyrannical government who sees her as a dirty computer and that she needs to be wiped. Basically,
she needs to be cleaned and put back into a non-confrontational, regulated kind of lifestyle.
Yeah. And so the whole movie is this team of white men trying to erase her memories, which are manifested as the music videos to each track.
Yeah. And it's revealed that she's been in a loving relationship with another woman, and there is intrigue there. It's a somewhat optimistic story that this system of cleaning out the things that make us different is being fought against. And she joins that fight.
So she says, one of the things that was important to me about making this record was to make sure that I was coming from a very honest place. So it's an album to really celebrate those that I felt needed to be celebrated, those who are in marginalized communities. This is the first time that I felt threatened and unsafe as a young black woman who grew up in America. And this is the first time that I've released something that has a lot of emotion in it. The people I love feel threatened. I've always understood the responsibility of an artist, but I feel it even greater now. And I don't want to stay angry, but I want to write and I want to feel triumphant.
Yeah, she says that this record is the first record that's actually about her as opposed to a character.
Yeah.
Like this, releasing something without a lot of emotion. What she meant was that she's present in these songs, she's not distancing herself and having a buffer, between the audience and her.
When she talked to Rolling Stone, she said from an early age, she'd been a sci-fi fantasy fan, and she was really into the Twilight Zone and Star Wars. And those genres were kind of escapism, but for her, it was also about being an outcast. And so that's why she did the Cindy Mayweather persona. But it also seemed to her like it was a buffer between her and engaging sincerely with the world.
Yeah, she definitely approaches science fiction as a way to talk about now, but with that kind of, with the buffer, with the slightly offset content. She said, I thought science fiction was a great way of talking about the future. It doesn't make people feel like you're talking about things that are happening right now, so they don't feel like you're talking down to them. It gives the listener a different perspective. I knew I needed to make this album, and I put it off because the subject is Janelle Monáe. So when she finally did it, she really leaned into the science fiction part of it that would separate, and I guess this is the video, this is the short film, the story of being uncertain of your position in society and fighting to have that, have your qualities recognized. She couched in science fiction to keep people from thinking that she was lecturing.
So one big inspiration for her sort of doing this differently this time was the fact that Prince was her mentor, and that he died in the middle of her working on it. And it made her start to think about how she presented herself. She said, I couldn't fake being vulnerable. And in terms of how I will be remembered, I have anxiety around that. The whole concept of what I'll be remembered for. So she points out that Prince was a person that she would call and talk to about sounds or how she should say something or if she was saying too much on a record. And she could never imagine a time where she couldn't just pick up the phone or email Prince and he'd contact her right back, and that they would have these things that they would talk about, that he would kind of guide her through.
Yeah, and throughout the whole record, you could say, oh, I hear a sort of Prince influence, and then there's one song that's like, oh, wow, that's a really good Prince song.
It's very clearly an homage to Prince, yeah.
So she said to BBC Radio, she'd been working with Prince, quote, before he passed on to another frequency, and he helped me come up with sounds. I really miss him. It's hard for me to talk about him, but I do miss him, and his spirit will never leave me.
So there is, alongside Prince, a massive roster of musicians who were involved in co-writing this or guesting on this record. Prince, I don't think, performed on anything because of his untimely death, but he's on the previous record to this.
Yeah. And his influence is obvious. Yeah.
Yeah. But we have got this is just a reduced list of the people that are involved in this.
Before you go through the annotated list, I just want to say the liner notes, they break up the personnel into musicians, technical, arrangement, and design.
Oh, okay.
And so musicians is the biggest list. The technical section lists all the people who did recording or vocal production. There doesn't seem to be a single producer aside from Janelle Monáe, right? This is a team effort in many ways. A lot of these tracks were done in isolation with a particular team. So it's a very consistent record, but the individuals doing it are different on almost every single track.
Yeah, and before we get into listing all these people too, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Monáe has a collaborative, I don't know what you call it, called Wonderland Art Society that is based outside of Atlanta. And it's her creative headquarters. It's a physical space, but it's also like a community.
Yeah,
and
she modeled it after Paisley Park, which is Prince's compound.
Yeah. So apparently she established this as a label, but also as a space. She's one of the few black women who has a label of her own, and she signed several acts, including the band Saint Beauty and the singer-rapper Jadena. Wonderland artists practice together. They appear on each other's records. The compound is a place where they all crash together. It's become a center of black culture in Atlanta. Apparently when they were shooting Black Panther, the movie, in Atlanta, the cast would go down to Wonderland and have these gatherings. And this is just a story that Chadwick Boseman would go down there and play drums while Lupita Nyong'o was hailed as being the best dancer. They're just having these awesome music parties, basically.
Yeah, and Monáe even says the Black Panther crew, was one of the first groups of people to hear the record.
Yeah.
And that them liking it gave her the boost that she needed. She said, I felt understood. I felt like, man, these are people I admire and I respect. They love this album. I have to finish it.
So a lot of the folks we're about to list are involved with Wonderland. Deep Cotton is an American funk duo that's based out of Atlanta. They're part of Wonderland Arts Society. They helped co-write several of the songs on Monáe's record.
Nana Kwabena Tuffer is an American musician who works with Monáe and other Wonderland artists. This is, again, that sort of collective thing, people appearing on each other's records.
John Bryan is an American musician, an established producer and composer.
He is probably the most mass appeal kind of person on this list. And I don't even know that that's the right way. John Bryan's music and tone has gotten out into the world, into advertising and into movie scores and all that. Roman Gianarthur is part of the Wonderland Arts Collective.
And then somebody just named Mr. Hudson, who is an English musician that was brought in on this record.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? I meant to say John Bryan is LA based.
Oh, okay.
Taylor Parks is an American singer-songwriter and an actress. She's worked also with Khalid, Ariana Grande, and Panic at the Disco.
Another songwriting team called Mattman and Robin. They're Swedish. And
if they weren't Swedish, I wouldn't find that nearly as funny. But the fact that there's a couple Swedes, Mattman and Robin, is amazing.
So these are some people that they've written for: Taylor Swift, Carly Rae Jepsen, Haley Steinfeld, Selena Gomez, Gwen Stefani, Nick Jonas, Britney Spears, and Pink. So we're starting to see, this is interesting, right? This record has, it's almost like putting a writer's room together for a TV show.
A little
there's
bit,
like people who are close to her, who are part of her community, and then there's these other people who have mass appeal resumes, essentially, that say okay, they've written hit singles for these artists before.
Yeah. And interestingly, Mattman and Robin and Justin Tranter and Julia Michaels, they are songwriters and producers who have this sort of other list of clients or other list of partners that have a lot of overlap. For instance, Justin Tranter also wrote for Britney Spears, Gwen Stefani, Linkin Park, Kelly Clarkson, Selena Gomez, Justin Bieber, Kesha, Ariana Grande, and Fall Out Boy.
Please, it's KE $, ha.
Is that how I'm supposed to say it now?
That's how James Vanderbeek says it.
Oh, well, I got to do what James Vanderbeek does. Julia Michaels also has written with Selena Gomez, Demi Lovato, Britney Spears, Justin Bieber, Haley Steinfeld, and Gwen Stefani. So there's this weird Venn diagram for that set of people.
Mm-hmm. And then Pharrell Williams, who is like a legit star, probably bigger than Janelle Monáe, also worked on this record. He's an American musician who started off in the Neptunes and Nerd. He's written and produced for various recording artists as well, but he also has like a very successful solo career, and he's a judge on one of those reality TV shows. Is it The Voice?
Moving on, also there's a group called Organized Noise. They're a production team based in Atlanta. And they've got Outkast, TLC, Goody Mob, and 2 Chainz on their list of collaborators.
What a odd mix of people, right?
Yeah, right. But if you go then to the liner notes, a lot of these folks are just on 1 or 2 tracks.
And I didn't even list people like Zoe Kravitz shows up on a song. I mentioned Grimes earlier, right? Thundercat and Soundwave are on here.
Yeah, Thundercat. Go back to our Kamasi Washington episode. Yeah, but a lot of these folks have... Well, if we look at the technical, right? John Bryan is track 4. Marco Sazzini is track 5. Win Bennett is track 7. Organized Noise is track 10. Like, these folks are coming in for 1 or 2 sessions, 1 or 2 tracks, and then moving on, or just sort of adding to the accumulative sound of the record.
It's so different from how I think about producing records, right? And it's amazing that this record has a cohesive sound from start to finish, given that its production was so...
This is back to the producer as a musician who plays the studio.
Yeah, but this is like, there isn't even a producer other than Monáe.
Janelle Monáe must be the producer in this.
It's kind of fascinating the way that it was all put together, and it's also interesting to me because, like, we just spent the first half of this episode talking about the importance of this record as a signifier for outcasts, right? For people who feel alienated, but then at the same time, like, it's her vision, but it was executed by like 30 people.
And we didn't even mention that Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys is on 2 tracks, and Stevie Wonder is on a track.
Right. So this is a record with like celebrity credibility. Yeah. But it also wasn't sold as such. And another part of that to keep in mind is the production company behind it. So Wonderland is Monáe's label, but she is also signed to Bad Boy Records, which is Sean Puffy Combs' label. This label was started in 1993. It operates as an imprint of Epic Records, which in turn is a part of Sony Records.
Hey, Chris, do you remember when you couldn't make it through a day without hearing about Puffy?
Yeah, he did. He used to be like a really big deal. And now I think he's just like a household name, but he's just kind of like a businessman.
Well, he seems to no longer be doing stuff that makes people say, what the hell are you doing, Puffy?
So she said she'd hear him out if he came down to see her perform, and that it was, quote, important to know if he was serious, that he was going to actually appreciate me and not try to change my live show or my music, which I would suspect as well, right? Like, that he had some ideas about how to sort of manufacture her, turn her into a different type of star. And apparently he halted filming a reality show that I've never heard of before.
Yeah, I guess maybe we're the folks who no longer hear about Puffy, but a lot of people still hear about
Puffy. Also remember, Metropolis came out in like 2008 or 2009 or something like that. So this was a while ago. But he said that he was really into it. And he said in a later interview, I knew I had to work with her. It was immediate. I just knew that she was going to be important for both music and culture. It was the same sort of feeling I had when I first heard Biggie or Mary J. Blige, and I wanted to help introduce this artist to the world.
That's a wild pair for comparison right there.
It is, but they're also, I think, people who he's probably most well known for collaborating with. And yeah, so this is fascinating, right? Because she is like this incredibly creative person who has this very unique identity, and yet she's been embraced by big companies who want to distribute the music and make money off of it. And then the production of the album involves like 30 some odd people all coming together over the course of years to record these tracks and write them.
Yeah, she's using the resources of, say, Bad Boy Records or Atlantic Records, right? A label that's been around for a long time and is owned now by Warner Brothers. It's one of the 5.
Yeah. So this is a co-production between Atlantic, Bad Boy, and her label. And I guess, you know what? Maybe if you look at it that way, that's where the sort of the split in the people who worked on the record comes from, because you've got her people from Wonderland, you've got his people as like the production team from Atlanta that have worked on hip hop before, and then you've got all these songwriters who have like crafted hits before that Atlantic are probably like, hey, you need to work with these people.
Yeah, or maybe they were like, hey, I heard that you're going to do a record with Janelle Monáe. I want to work with her. Okay. Along with the record, there was also a promotional film, an extended musical film, an emotion picture, whatever you want to call it. Emotion picture is what Monáe likes to say. In Rolling Stone, the movie was described as echoing The Handmaid's Tale. That series' examination of its society's cruel treatment of others reverberates through Dirty Computer's music videos, which defiantly celebrate nonconformity, femininity, and sexuality in all its permutations.
Yeah, so the reviewer at Rolling Stone, Tim Grierson, says that he feels like Monáe wants to do the same thing as The Handmaid's Tale. She wants to make sure that we notice the real-world parallels of the nightmare scenario in this, dystopian science fiction to what's going on in present day. But that she's also kind of doing, one of the things that's really fascinating about the short film is its embrace of science fiction visual aesthetics, but also Afrofuturism. And that connects back to the influence of the people making Black Panther on her performing the record and writing the songs. Yeah,
this is not superficial, the way it connects to this sort of history of this kind of story. There's Jodorowsky references in the fashion. There's THX 1138 references. And there's also references to sort of current work by someone I had never heard of, but whose work I'd seen many times, visual artist James Turrell, who had been the inspiration for the interior of the alien vessels from Arrival.
Yeah, okay. I didn't realize that. Yeah, that's a great movie. Have you seen Arrival?
Yeah, that's a hell of a movie. It hurts. It hurts to watch. Okay, well, now that you've brought that up as hard as you have, I'm going to have to go cry a little bit. So let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk awards and numbers. So, Chris, how are we authentic in this moment inside a big industry that we're trying to not really take part in?
Well, we don't have Sean Puffy Combs signing the checks, that's for sure. And we don't have Atlantic also signing some more checks. So unfortunately, you and I don't have a compound outside of Atlanta where we can invite the crew and cast of Black Panther to come and watch us record a podcast. But we do have our patrons who are doing that digitally, who are here with us as a community helping us produce this show.
We are a Patreon-supported podcast. If you like what you hear, we hope that you will go to patreon.com/supercontext and find out how you can join our community and get a few extras for your support.
Yeah, patrons are helping us to do things like pay our hosting fees or cover our expenses for the media artifacts that we research. They also help us pay for updating our recording setup and to create better production. We're looking ahead. We're hoping that we're going to be able to expand the support on the show and get things like transcripts made or create an internship or even travel so that we can record the show live in person at specific events.
Now, if you start supporting us as a Patreon member, you don't just help us make the show, you also get more of the show. Rewards at different levels include access to outtakes and blooper reels, a bi-weekly bonus mini episode, and the monthly shadow podcast, Super King Context, which focuses only on Stephen King film and television adaptations. We just did Children of the Corn. Ooh. And this month we're doing The Running Man, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Wow, that'll be interesting. Also, patrons get to choose topics that we cover. They also get to ask us questions that we answer in the mini episodes or present sponsorships that are done as live ad reads on the show. But what every patron gets, unless they ask not to, is to have their name read in this section of the show as thanks. So let's begin, and we'll start with our new patrons. Thank you for joining us, Ambrose Allen, Junta/Cult, Neil G. McGuire, and Sari Nichols.
Thank you, all four of you, for becoming part of the community. And thank you to our patrons, Alex Laird, Amit Doshi, Bennett Callahan, Beth Barnett, Billy Whitehouse, Brian Chovanich, Caroline Zoids, Chris Marlton, Cliff Landis, Coco, Dave Jordan, Dave Wachter, Eilish Phillips, and Evan Mapstone.
And thank you to Fred Rasco, Ira James Udiskin, Jason Puckett, Jess Staten, Jill Kaufman, Joseph Aleo, Calvin Ellis, Carmela Padovich, Kate Sharon, Kevin Wetter, and Christian Hirvila.
Thank you to Lee Fowler, Liliana Gill, Lokesh Dakar, Melinda Hale, Miriam Meany, Misha Moon, Nathan Weatherford, Nick Sage, Patrick Malka, Pete Bow, R.M. Rhodes, Rein It In, Matt and Rachel, Rob Sloan, Robert Negoesco, and Roman Marichek.
And thank you to Ron Bilodeau, Ross Llewellyn, Ryan O'Neill, Simon Workman, Thomas Tremberger, and Whitney Buchanan.
If you would like to join this list of wonderful people that make Super Context possible, go to patreon.com/supercontext. And we're back. You know, Chris, people liked this record. They liked it a lot.
Yeah, it was Album of the Year for both the Associated Press, the New York Times, and NPR. It received 2 Grammy nominations. It was nominated for Album of the Year, and then the song Pink was nominated for Best Music Video.
The motion picture, the emotion picture, was a finalist for a Hugo Award.
Yeah, that's cool, right? She was named Trailblazer of the Year at Billboard's Women in Music Awards, and she was named Woman of the Year by Glamour magazine. These are not the kinds of accolades that you would expect a record like this to receive.
Yeah, and also this is not the set that you'd expect altogether.
Right. Now, those are just like, people acknowledging her and the work that's done on this record. How many units did it move? Okay, we don't know total units, but we do know that when it first came out, it debuted at number 6 on the Billboard charts, and it had 54,000 album equivalent sales that week. So that's what they chart now, is not how many actual records you sell, but how many, like if you buy a certain amount of tracks off of the record, how much add up to an album.
But we should point out that it did not get certified gold, definitely not platinum.
Okay.
So it didn't reach that sales level, I guess that number of units, in the right way.
Okay, so it hasn't sold at least 100,000 over the course of, I don't know, the year that it's been out.
Of whatever that album equivalent unit is.
But that lines up with what New York Times Magazine said about this record. So Jenna Wortham wrote about it and said, despite the accolades and the Grammy nominations, Monáe has yet to achieve significant commercial success. If there's a moment that her entire discography has been building toward, it's right now with this release.
In a way, this is another first record for her.
Well, it's a first record for her in the sense that like she has like access to a massive audience now, right? And so she can really sort of change what her identity means in popular culture. But Wortham interviewed her, and Wortham said, I asked her what she ultimately wanted. Does she want awards? Does she want album sales? Does she want money? And Janelle Monáe referred to Prince. She said, he was in that free-ass motherfucker category. That's where I want to be. That's where I want to ultimately be.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I don't know what in particular it means, but the way it feels is you can do what you want. You can do you can pursue what you want to pursue.
Which, it's interesting, right? Because I'm sure like the suits at Atlantic or Puffy Combs, record label would have preferred if it had sold even more copies than it did.
Well, yeah, they have to.
But because she isn't a huge deal, she's not Beyonce level, she's able to sort of maintain this independent integrity.
Yeah, and there's this weird thing that I kind of feel in the back of my head that she is more interested in validation and admiration than she is in being super popular, because there's a little bit of that kind of, if the real Janelle Monáe gets out there, some people are not going to like it. Like, in particular, folks that got into her work early on and maybe aren't interested in hearing more about how she is queer or pansexual or, trying to promote nonconformity.
Well, this is interesting because that comes up in the NYT magazine interview as well. She told Wortham she's real worried about both her early fans and what her very religious and very Southern family will think about this record. And that there is very little precedent for there being a black female celebrity that's at her level that also lives openly as a lesbian in a gay relationship.
And in that Jenna Wortham article, we get the sort of the metaphor of the dirty computer kind of declared again. At its core, Dirty Computer is an homage to women and the spectrum of sexual identities. Songs can be grouped into 3 categories: reckoning, celebration, and reclamation. The first songs deal with realizing that this is how society sees me, Monáe said. This is how I'm viewed. I'm a dirty computer. It's clear. I'm going to be pushed to the margins, outside margins of the world. And then the songs move into a party, a welcoming celebration of everything. Monáe says, it's okay. These are the cards I've been dealt. And that includes songs that Wortham describes as sizzling, sex-drenched songs that titillated the internet when they were released earlier this year. And then it moves into being an American. This is the reclamation. With lyrics like, and this is Wortham pulling out particulars, love me for who I am, cross my heart and hope to die, I'm a big old piece of American pie. And Monáe says, right now I'm escaping the gravity of the labels that people have tried to place on me that have stopped my evolution. You have to go ahead and soar, not be afraid to jump. And I'm jumping right now.
So talking about the way that this album represents identity is a little difficult, I think, for us because, well, if you've never listened to the show before, Charlie and I are 2 white, straight, middle-aged dudes. And as Charlie alluded to at the top, like, this is a kind of alienation that maybe we are not able to relate to as much or identify with. But it is fascinating to see how she takes that particular alienation and turns it into something that's for everybody. Like,
she celebrates herself.
Yeah, the description of the album and the way it goes through, it's not specifically about being black or specifically about being queer, but it's about being, quote, dirty computer, right? And feeling...
And a free-ass motherfucker.
Yeah, right. And then celebrating that and then turning around and reclaiming what your community actually means.
And to go along with the release of the record, Monáe basically came out broadly and widely. In her Rolling Stone interview that went with this particular record release, she said, being a queer black woman in America, someone who has been in relationships with both men and women, I consider myself to be a free-ass motherfucker. And Rolling Stone says that makes it impossible not to view Dirty Computer as Monáe's emotional, feminist updating of the dystopian concerns that have always swirled through science fiction.
So because you're not like into this kind of music, you probably weren't even paying attention when this record came out, Charlie. But like there was a flurry of internet gossip about her, like the week or 2 leading up to it, and then right when it released, because she hadn't yet said publicly that she was pansexual, but she was like seen in public with Tessa Thompson, and like then a video would be released and they'd be like, oh, like they seem to be flirting with each other in that video. What's going on? And so there was just a lot of speculation about her identity and sexuality.
And so there's the performance of the story of Dirty Computer, the performance of Cindy Mayweather, the performance of Janelle Monáe publicly, and then she kind of turns all of that into this story of Dirty Computer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so for her, it's about identity and the fluidity of reality, and the sci-fi nature is sort of how to tell that story. And it's something that we've seen in a lot of sci-fi stories, movies, books, whatever.
Yeah, the characters in the movie Dirty Computer, they are themselves if they remember their lives and if they do the things that they feel programmed to do. But, I guess not programmed, that they feel driven to do. And then they have those memories taken away and they're programmed to do the opposite of what they want to do.
Yeah. And so a lot of people compare it to Terry Gilliam's Brazil, actually, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, there's that wicked inversion of the... Okay, so big spoiler alerts, everyone, for the endings of Brazil, which you should have already seen, and Dirty Computer, which you might be interested in watching.
You can watch all of Dirty Computer on YouTube, by the way, or like any free streaming service.
Yeah. So in Brazil, we see our hero break free. He's rescued. He breaks free. He makes it to the edge of the horrible world and then becomes safe and happy. And then it slams back into his head because what he's done is he's fantasized in the midst of being tortured that he is.
Well,
escaped.
We should also point out there's 3 different endings to Brazil. You just described Terry Gilliam's ending.
Yes, I described the actual ending as opposed to the, what was it? The Sid Sheinberg cut is the one that takes out the revelation that it's not a happy ending.
So this goes to show you when Brazil was made, regardless of race or sexual identity, even a unhappy ending was deemed to be something that wasn't marketable.
Yeah, but has been sort of retroactively validated. So what Dirty Computer does is they give us the tragic ending. She gets cleaned. She is, lobotomized or turned. It's the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in a way.
Except
then there's a little bit of credits, and then boom. The heist begins and everybody gets away.
Yeah, the twist turns out to be Tessa Thompson and Janelle Monáe, neither of whom have actually been wiped. And they break free and then they free, I don't remember the name of the actor, the male actor that was part of their party crew.
Well, yeah, he's kind of marginalized in the film anyway. He's much less important. The ending of Dirty Computer, the movie, is also sort of the point of Dirty Computer, the album, right? It is a celebration and it is a sort of release from the confines. It is all about, in a way, it's all about her coming out, right?
Yeah. And so Monáe said that she felt like the album itself was her coming out, but coming out as an advocate for women and queer issues. And she said, I want it to be very clear that I'm an advocate for women. I'm a girl's girl, meaning I support women no matter what they choose to do. I'm proud when everybody is taking agency over their image and their bodies. She also said that she wants the album to be especially relevant to Black women and queer women, and for them to feel like they're being seen and heard in this album. She wants it to feel like the same way she felt like when she listened to Lauryn Hill, and that she was trying to find herself as a young woman, and the way that she felt when she was first listening to Stevie Wonder, and she was trying to understand God more, which is interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, that's some wild gospel right there. And so I think this is a good sort of summation of what Monáe has said about the place she wants the record to take. She told Rolling Stone she wants young girls, young boys, non-binary, gay, straight, queer people who are having a hard time dealing with their sexuality, dealing with feeling ostracized or bullied for just being their unique selves, to know that I see you. Monáe is proud to be a Dirty Computer, and she'd like you to be too.
So this gets back to what you started with, Charlie. You felt like, as much as you admired this record, that it wasn't for you. And I think what she's saying here is, well, she specifically wants it to be uplifting for Black women or for queer women, right? But she's also saying here, it's essentially, it's for everybody. She didn't list you. She says young boys. She doesn't say middle-aged boys. But she is saying essentially anybody who feels ostracized, anybody who feels like they're not accepted for being their unique selves, she wants you to feel like this record's for you.
Yeah, which is, for some people, a very hard row to hoe when you know that your difficulties are not the same as someone who is being, fundamentally oppressed. And I want to make it clear that it's not that I think it's not for me, so much as it made me recognize that the things I had looked for before to make me feel better, the music that I played really fucking loud when I was a teenager, was more about you, listener. You can be like this. You are this. It's okay. Whereas Monáe's record and her attitude is, hey, we're all together.
Right.
I see
Which
you.
is why the whole record ends with the American reclamation, right? Like,
yeah,
it's basically saying, like, anybody who feels like an outsider can be an American.
And there's this transcendence of the idea that it is for folks who are queer. It is for people who are non-binary. It becomes a thing that's for people who are American. And she's very explicit about that.
And this is where we get into, some larger talk about what it means for identity, this record, and the big themes on it. Monáe says, I love being American. I love having been born here. I love having my roots here. There are some really evil things that have happened here and continue to happen here, but it speaks to being afraid and to forgiving. And she basically talks about, like, she's worried about being hurt again or being manipulated or not standing her ground. But she also wants to forgive herself and reclaim this identity.
Yeah, and that's the meaning of a particular song that she's talking about, a song called So Afraid. And so she loves her country, and she recognizes the things that have happened that might make you not love, but she's afraid to forgive for being vulnerable or to let someone hurt her again. So it's like, yeah, it's a talk about patriotism or nationalism or pride, but also it's a very down and dirty human feeling of, I want to be strong and vulnerable, but I'm afraid that that's making me naive and, put in danger.
Yeah, and she also talks about the song Django Jane, which is, I guess, like, if we're thinking about it in thirds, Django Jane is sort of like the ending of the first wave heading into the second wave. And she says that this is the song that is a response to her feeling the sting of threats being made against her rights as both a woman, a black woman, and a sexually liberated woman, even just as a daughter with parents who have been oppressed for many decades. She says black women and those who have been the other and are marginalized in society, that is who I wanted to support. And that was more important than my discomfort about speaking out.
The record can sneak by you. If you're just sort of listening, like, you might miss that all of this is wrapped up in the record because it's a really good pop record. Yeah. But she was really struggling with what she was going to say on it when she was writing it. Yeah,
I mean, this seems to us like stuff that, like, oh, well, of course, like, anybody would just, write the lyrics to their song. But for her, it was like, wow, I've been working really hard on this career. Will I, like, blow everything up if I reveal some kind of authenticity on this record?
Right. If I am authentically myself, when the version of myself that I want to reveal makes a lot of people sort of engage in knee-jerk rejection.
Right. Yeah. We should also mention, too, like, another reason why she received a lot of accolades in terms of, like, Woman of the Year and things like that is because not only did she put out this record that year, but she was politically active. In 2017, when there was the Women's March at the presidential inauguration, she was invited to speak and sing at the event by Ginny Suss, who is a member of the organizing committee that was in charge of music. Suss said this about Monáe: when you look at the arc of her career, there has always been a moral code and an ethical center to her music, and that breaks down constructions of race and gender and society. And it's a tool to imagine the world we want through the accessibility of pop music. Having her stand up and have that voice at the march was amazing. That's a really succinct way to describe this record.
That quote makes me feel so dumb because it's like, yes, of course. Whenever I have like struggled with how is it that jazz is actually in some way changing the world, right? Or did change the world. You know, how can music really fight against anything? How can I take someone seriously when they're like, I'm writing this song to change, you know, the situation in the world? Well, this is it. This is the way that you can kind of understand that just like fiction, you know, presenting a world you want in a way that slides past rational defenses is a way to get your message into people's heads.
Yeah, she's using pop music as like a vehicle, a tool in order to try to convey this message. And she's doing it in a really positive way too. Like, the more I think about the arc of the record, the more I really admire how she thought about how to present this argument.
Yeah, she's very intentional and she's very thoughtful about how she's, I think, doing everything in her career. You know, and when she talks in interviews about her history, you know, we've got this long quote from a CBS interview of her talking about her past and talking about herself. She says, "My grandmother was a sharecropper in Aberdeen, Mississippi, and she didn't have the opportunity to vote. I just made a promise to her that when I became 18 and I had the right to exercise my power, I would do that in her honor." And then she's talking about the present moment. "And even though I could be in another city doing a concert, I will fly back to make sure that I vote. As an artist, I've had lots of opportunities to travel and go see the world. But when I take off my makeup, when I take off my outfit, you know I'm still Janelle Monáe Robinson, who grew up in Kansas City, Kansas, to working class parents. So being a young black queer woman in America at any moment, I could have my rights taken away from me."
So this is like a really important statement for her, that like, that she has an opportunity that her family members didn't have before her. And not only because of the time that she's in, but because of her success as an artist. And she sees a certain amount of responsibility that goes along with that, and that she has to use that success as a platform in order to not only to keep her rights from being taken away from her, but to also provide, I guess, in some ways, a safe space, like a safe cultural space for other people to feel like they're seen within.
Yeah, she's very clear about the danger of being a person who is not, who does not conform completely, but she's not angry about that in sort of the overall work. The record itself is meant to help people feel seen, and specifically seen by Janelle Monáe. So it's not even like a lecturing or a absorbing record. She doesn't say, "I speak for all of us," or "I speak for my group." She says, "I'm me, I'm here. We're all okay together."
And I think that's my big takeaway from this record is, despite you and I feeling alienated from society on a daily basis, when I see that somebody spent years putting this together and putting it out into the world, it makes me think, you know what, maybe we're going to be okay.
Who are you? You look like Chris, but I don't think you are.
You've been listening to Super Context, a podcast autopsy of media.
How it's made and how it informs our everyday culture.
Our theme music is Human Factor by Mile Marker.
And right now you're listening to Drive Fast by 3 Chain Links.
Show notes and all our past episodes are available at supercontextpodcast.libsyn.com.
You can email the show at supercontextpodcast@gmail.com to tell us what you like, what you don't like, and to suggest topics for future shows.
And I'm available on Twitter as @ChristianSager.
And I'm there at Bennett Radio. 2 N's, 2 T's.